Hey guys, this is Courtney from Willow's Bloom, and I am super excited today to talk to you about the solar eclipse that we're having in Aries on April 8th at 19 degrees of Aries. A solar eclipse is a new moon, so that is going to indicate that we are planting a seed, we're going to have some kind of new beginning, and it does take 6 months for that to really sprout or for that to really kind of fully congeal and make sense. So if this doesn't totally resonate at this time, just give it a few more months to fully unfold. But typically what we're going to see with the eclipses is a sign, a kind of initial burst of energy representing what is to come, and then it unfolds a little bit more slowly over time. So let's talk about this eclipse. It's really interesting because Chiron is right next to the sun and moon at 19 degrees. So it's Chiron, sun, moon, all 19 degrees of Aries, and then of course it's next to the North Node. So one thing I like about this eclipse is that it is with the North Node, which indicates that we're growing, we're evolving. This is how we're meant to kind of be, evolving as souls, essentially. Not just letting things go, but starting new ventures or reinforcing something or strengthening some aspect of ourself or our psyche or our life. With Chiron being involved, Chiron, I'm sure you guys are aware, is the wounded healer. And I have a video on Chiron if you're interested. I will link it down below if I can remember. If not, just look on my channel and type in Chiron. So Chiron and Aries in particular, and next to this eclipse, is going to represent the element of healing, but it's also going to represent the element of wounding as well. So I think many of us are going to notice some of those things that bring up our childhood wounds and make us maybe feel insecure, the things that have gotten in our way and that have prevented us from feeling maybe strong or independent or brave or assertive or confident all on our own, which are all very Aries themes. So if you have kind of tried to be a pioneer and do something new, or if you've tried to go somewhere by yourself and be more independent, or if you've tried to kind of take up space and lead and show people the way for something, these are all going to be Aries themes. And if you've done those things and felt weak or uncertain about yourself, or you had a lot of confidence and then you didn't have a lot of confidence, if there was questioning or wavering, that can all be addressed during this eclipse. Basically, what is the reason behind why we at times feel like we can't move forward with things that make us us, or with things that we need to do and accomplish on our own. Aries is of course the first sign of the zodiac. It is the I am statement when you're looking at, it's Mercury retrograde, so I feel like I'm going to be just struggling. I taught yoga this morning. I couldn't even put a sentence together. So anywho, it's the I am statement. So this eclipse is going to draw out what makes us us. And it helps to always to have eclipses like this, because it's almost like we can have something add on to our personality, or we can become more aware of different aspects of the self. And particularly with Chiron here, we can become more aware of the wounded aspects of ourself that, again, have prevented us from fully flourishing, from fully kind of embracing life with this playful, childlike attitude. So it's like, what happens when you're a kid that prevents you from feeling truly like kids feel? And that's kind of what we can experience at this eclipse. So some things that kids experience are like total acceptance of how things are. They don't try to resist life. They really feel like they're more reactive, right? Like they're taking life how it comes at them. They're not worried about the future. And this is very Aries qualities, by the way. They're present and brave and willing to engage right here, right now. And they kind of want it right here, right now. There's a little bit of the sense of tempestuousness or like impatience, that childlike enthusiasm and passion of, I see that candy, I want that candy, and nothing's going to get in my way. This kind of direct line of like to our desires. And I think as we grow older, we can lose that direct connection. It can become convoluted because we are filled with doubt or we've had painful experiences. And then we start to have that connection to our desires, again, become muddled with all these other beliefs and experiences. Children also are very much aware of all the possibilities. They kind of have this sense of optimism about life, this passion for life, that they feel like life is at their fingertips. So much is yet to unfold. They want so much, and they can have it if they want it. And so there's this self-belief that comes with Aries and with this eclipse that I think we're going to be healing through. So all these things I'm mentioning are things that, if there's wounding around it, we are going to be healing it at the time of this eclipse and over this next 6 months. Also, the sense of play. I think a lot of times we can take things really seriously, but as a fire sign, Aries wants to feel engaged with what it's doing. It wants to feel like it's connected to it. There's a mission there, a purpose there, or if it's not a purpose, like it's just the pure enjoyment of whatever that is. You feel in flow. You feel like yourself. You feel like you're expressing yourself, or you're just having fun or connecting with others, or whatever that is. But there's that sense of kind of playfulness with whatever it is that you're doing. And if we've been too serious in life, I think we'll start to see where we've been maybe too serious. Unrestricted joy, the sense of magic, I think is very much what it's like to be a kid. Again, I think magic also kind of stems with the idea of everything being possible. And so I think many of us can become jaded, and this eclipse is trying to highlight where or why we've become jaded, so we can kind of go back and reprogram ourselves to open us up to feel like we can have more, we can want what we want. We don't have to have fears. We can have joy and fun as we do these things. And we can do it on our own too. We don't have to have this kind of reliance on other people, which is where the South Node in Libra is. So many people are going through breakups or divorces or friendship separations or periods of isolation. And the people who are going through that are losing relationships that are not totally tied into their purpose, or who are not going to help advance some of their true desires. And there are going to be many people who come into relationships because those are going to fortify who you already are. They're going to add to who you already are and what you really want and aid you in getting there. And so I think a lot about this whole eclipse season throughout the year, now and in the fall, is really coming to terms with those dynamics. Like, what do I want, and like how are people inhibiting or supporting that? And if they're not supporting it, they will fall away. And the thing with eclipses is it brings up a lot of fated events. So you will run into somebody randomly, or you will hear something repetitively and it's like a synchronicity. You will have some kind of just weird thing happen that doesn't normally happen, or a really strong feeling about something, and then it comes true, because that's what eclipses are. They're with the nodes. They're all about our fate, our destiny, and it's acting as a catalyst to push us forward with momentum into a new reality. And especially in Aries eclipse, which is all about the new, all about this fresh start. It's the start of the astrological new year now that we're in Aries season. And so it truly is this kind of like big opening for us that the universe is trying to kind of shove us through and be like, okay, you can do this, you can do this. And Chiron here is maybe us like pushing back on our heels and feeling like, I don't know if I can do this because of this thing that happened in the past, or this wounding, or this fear, or whatever that is that has jaded us, like I mentioned before. And so it's the job of this eclipse and the energy of the universe and the support of our guides or God or whatever you believe in, to kind of, again, override those fears that can be very much based off of real things. And that's why I think it's so important to have extra divine support and astrological energy like this. This eclipse is also conjunct Mercury. So Mercury's at 24 degrees. This is eclipse at 19. So it's it's pretty close. I wouldn't say it's super, super close. But what's interesting is that Mercury is retrograde. It actually, I think it's stationed today and it's going to go retrograde tomorrow. I'm already feeling it because I'm very Mercury ruled. But Mercury retrograde tends to, like many of you know, kind of create a little bit of dysfunction. So I think there is some element here of this eclipse being a little bit dysfunctional, or like things happening that are like that don't go according to plan, but they were destined to not go according to plan, if that's the case. And I think for many of us, we'll have things come up from the past because Mercury is retrograde in Aries. We'll have things come up in the past that are, of course, related to ourselves, related to our relationships, anything that's kind of important for the play that or for this whole situation to play out that you're destined to experience. So random things can go awry on purpose, or things can come up from the past on purpose to be addressed. And that's really doubled down because the ruler of this eclipse, Mars, is next to Saturn. And anytime we see the ruler of a new or full moon next to Saturn, it's very common to have situations, issues, things from the past come back up. And so that's already kind of likely to play out. Mercury retrograde being in Aries, a sign that is, again, really wanting to move things forward, with having a planet be reversing in that energy, it's not the most compatible. And so it can create a little bit of a feeling of frustration, like, why am I struggling to move past this? Or, I thought that this issue or this thing was done, or I thought that this would be a clear sailing forward because all the green lights were there. But then when I actually left, somebody T-boned me, so like little things, again, can go awry and slow it down. And that can create this feeling of pressure, anxiety, frustration, irritability, feeling like, okay, I want this momentum, but there's this retrograde also happening that's having me kind of slow down and look in the rearview mirror around what has already taken place and kind of process and synthesize the things that have happened over these last few months and even this past eclipse that we just had recently. And so I think that this can kind of affect us. I mean, this can affect our physical well-being, our mental health, our relationships, because of this little bit of chaotic energy. But it really serves, again, a very unique purpose to have us slow this energy down, because Aries is all about like forward, but there are things from the past that have not been fully laid to rest. And I think that with having, again, the ruler of this eclipse next to Saturn and Mercury retrograde, it's giving us a little bit more of this slow down effect so that we can truly go back and like look at what has happened and make sure that we are over it so that we can move ahead into a new beginning. So what that is for you is going to be different for everybody, but you could have had major life endings or just little things that you're kind of trying to leave behind. Like if you have a sugar addiction, maybe you have a flare up again or something happen again where you're like, I thought that I was over that. I thought I wasn't addicted anymore. And then it comes back up. So it could be something small like that, or it could be something big like, a job ending or a relationship or something shifting in your life that you thought was over, and then it comes back up in some kind of way for you to address. So there is that energy here. So if that is happening to you, have compassion with yourself, especially with Chiron on the nodes, with Chiron on this new moon. I mean, a lot of us are going to experience heightened sensitivity and, strong emotions. And so I really feel like it's going to be very important for us to have kind of this way of nurturing ourselves and taking care of ourselves and giving ourselves compassion, because the experiences that we could go through around this eclipse might be somewhat triggering or might be drawing out really deep wells of emotions because of their connection to things that could have happened to you a long time ago. And so again, like if you're like trying to move forward at the same rate, or you're not respecting the fact that you're going through a lot inside, it's just going to make things harder. So having compassion and maybe adjusting your external reality accordingly can do a lot to help with this healing process. So, as I mentioned, the ruler of this eclipse, which is Mars, because Mars rules Aries, is in Pisces and it's conjunct Saturn. So I already talked about how this brings up issues from the past. So this is interesting because the last eclipse that we went through, the Libra eclipse, that was just 2 weeks ago, also had Venus in Pisces conjunct Saturn. And that was the ruler of that eclipse. So we're having this kind of repeating theme here of the rulers of the eclipses both sitting next to Saturn, a karmic planet, a planet that does bring up difficult situations. It brings up things that are coming to an end or needing to commit to something further and take more responsibility for something. It's a planet that brings up stuff from the past and makes us very aware of time as well, like well into the future. 3, 5, 10 years from now, does this situation or person or thing or habit serve me in that long time frame? So we're seeing this kind of, again, through line between these two eclipses, how Saturn is here helping us get more serious about these issues. And also Saturn, I think in many ways can feel sometimes quite heavy. Like I said, it can bring up things that are filled with like delays, in a sense of, it's like whatever situation we're going through, it doesn't just feel like we can skip off into the sunset. With Chiron on this eclipse and with Saturn next to the ruler, it feels like there's a lot that we're having to process to actually get to that exciting thing that we desire. We can't just reach out and touch it. There's our own limitations in the way, or even practical limitations that we have to honor, or things from the past that we have to process, like I mentioned. And so I feel like one of the things that is going to be really important with this, especially being in a water sign like Pisces, I think our sensitive nature is really going to come up. So again, things from the past, but more so repressed or buried emotional experiences or intuitive insights, things that we have had come through for us in dreams, or maybe things that have come through the energy body but hasn't made themselves aware yet. Those are all going to come up right now. So that's why I said like dreams, or even visions that come up in meditations, things like that, again, are probably more in the energy body. So it's like information that we are processing subconsciously, or information that we are receiving as downloads, but maybe we haven't fully accessed it consciously, thought about it. So that's going to be the case for some of us. And then for others of us, there's things that we've actively pushed down that has to be looked at, that has to be felt, that has to be acknowledged, and again, given compassion in order for things to feel like we can really move forward and be confident, be independent, connect with our desires, play, have all these things that children get to have. But we can't have that if we kind of continue to hold on to things that that emotionally are dragging us down, but that we're not acknowledging. So I think in many ways it's allowing ourselves to have a big kind of cathartic release. And there's a lot of other ways that Saturn can come into play. But in general, I think if we can just remember the way that Saturn does, like, it's interesting. Like, the Saturn has the archetype of kind of like this old wise man. And then when we think about Aries energy, it's like kind of this like young little kid that just like really wants what it wants, like I mentioned. And so in order to get to that youthful energy, we first have to go through this wise, old, kind of karmic energy. And so there might be something there that you guys are able to connect with for yourself around, how do I feel lighter and more joyful and more passionate, more desired, connected to my desires, by first acknowledging like the things that I have learned, the things from the past, by processing all this stuff, by accessing my wisdom, by slowing down, by being aware of reality and what would actually get me to that place in my life. How can I be unjaded by, I feel like, metabolizing our experiences and creating wisdom out of them instead of just trauma? Because I feel like sometimes when we go through something and it's not fully processed, it's like we have a lot of trigger points around it and we don't really have the full lesson around it. We don't we have more emotion. And I feel like when the emotion finally subsides to some degree or is processed to some degree, like what's left over is the wisdom, the knowledge of that experience that is embodied within you, without the reactivity and the trigger points of the emotions that were left over. So I feel like there's something about passing through the wisdom to almost like de-age, like a Benjamin Button kind of situation. So I feel like that's a little bit of this kind of symbol or imagery. So I hope that might be helpful to some of you guys. So yeah, and I think that's going to help us become more stable. Saturn is about stabilizing something. And if we just rushed straight into Aries energy and we didn't do any of this other work, I think that what happens is we get burnt out. We are not connected to our wisdom. So we actually don't have the reality to make sure that we can get what we want, or we get what we want and we quickly discard it, or we just run into dangerous, risks or situations that actually end up hurting us. So it's like, you want to go straight for the childlike wonder, but if you don't have the wisdom with it, there's a lot of adverse consequences and reactions and things that can happen as a result of not acknowledging the Saturn presence that might feel heavy, but is so worth it in the long run because of its stabilizing and solidifying nature. So I really feel like the goal of this eclipse is to make our desires real and manifest. And that desire is going to look different for every one of you, depending on how this hits your natal chart. But it's also not just about making your desires manifest. It's also about further understanding the self and the journey of the hero's journey of actually getting to those things, like moving towards something that we crave, that we long for. That transforms us as a person, and that evolution of our soul is really what Aries is truly about. Again, the I am, the definition of the self, the understanding of the self. And that's also something that I think is really up for grabs throughout this year with these eclipses and the Aries Libra energy. Many of us can kind of be defined by what we want to be perceived as, by the likability, our reputation, our connection and relationship with certain people. We can be kind of like predefined by others in a way, and we could have been even codependent. It's going to vary drastically from person to person, but there's a sense of really untangling yourself from that and understanding who you are at your core alone and on this hero's journey. And so that's, I think, a big part of what this eclipse is about, and I'm excited to see that kind of come full circle in the next series of eclipses that we have in the fall. So I think a lot of this is about, also with Mars and Saturn being in Pisces in particular, this is a very spiritual, very unfettered, detached, creative type of energy. It's nebulous, it's porous, it can take on different facets. It's not predefined. And so again, I feel like that's a lot around this journey of discovering who we are. Like, we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and allow things to be uncertain, allow things to not be solid, which is interesting because Saturn makes things solid, and I think that's where we're going. But being in the sign of Pisces, the only way to get there is by not being solid at all, or not, maybe not at all, but to some degree in some areas of our life, to not have the answers, to not know, to be okay with the in-between, the questions, the liminal state. And that's where we can access this really strong sense of spiritual connection and creative inspiration, because it's from that place of a blank slate that we're able to trust the divine process and lean on the things that we cannot see, like God, as well as come up with something brand new, uninvented before. That is the creative process. You're just pulling ideas out of thin air kind of thing. So I feel like we're coming into this place of reinventing ourselves. And again, we have to maybe have some endings or some processing of other things, or some nebulousness and these liminal states and these question marks, in order for that reinvention to occur. And ultimately, I feel like that's going to help us just feel like more of ourselves. And I'm really excited to see what this whole eclipse season does for us as individuals and how we each change in such big ways this next year, especially if you have any planets at 19 degrees of any of the cardinal signs. So Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, you'll be most affected by an eclipse like this because of those hard aspects. Okay, what else do I want to say? So we have some other interesting energy going on. Actually, before I move on, I was pulling cards around Mars and Saturn being in Pisces, and I got this new deck recently, this anatomy deck, which I don't have here, but one of the cards that I got was the pelvis, and then the other card that I got was the uterus. So it's interesting because I feel like there's a sense of both structure and protection, while also having this kind of like softness and creative life forming energy. So the Saturn energy is the structure of our life that is honestly shifting, because we also have this softness. So it's like, it's a mixture of both, where we're having some things be solid and then some things be really malleable. And it's in that place of this kind of contradiction, this polarity, that we're able to achieve life and protect that life. And I mean, when I say achieve life, I feel like rebirthing ourselves or coming up with our kind of reinvented self. So it's exciting to think about it like that. So one of the other aspects going on at this eclipse is Venus being in Aries conjunct Neptune. Like I mentioned, Venus doesn't like to be in this sign because Aries is about the self and Venus is a relational planet. And Aries tends to kind of like dive in headfirst. Like I've been saying all these things about children and that energy of this kind of passion and this optimism that fire can have. So Venus and Aries can dive in headfirst into something, and being next to Neptune, it cannot have all the answers. So it's almost like if you, let's say that you met somebody online and then you fly to a foreign country to meet them in person, and you feel like this is my person, and there's just this sense of enthusiasm and purity, almost this kind of childlike wonder, and maybe even like into more extremes like infatuation, obsession, fantasizing about something or someone that isn't based off of reality, so like delusion. That would be kind of like the more intense version of this. But the less intense would be to just like really prop something up and feel very strongly about something and dive head first into something that doesn't actually have the means to sustain itself, or we don't have all the answers at the least. So there's an energy here of like being a little bit overly optimistic and really, again, like wanting to dive in head first. And then once we do that, we've realize the full context. We start to see, oh, this person that flew me out to this foreign country, they have kids, they're already married, they have debt, they locked me up in their basement. I'm just kidding. I don't know. It's just like, other context of things that you might not have initially thought because you were in a fantasy land, or you were just extremely optimistic, extremely hopeful, and we're kind of overflowing with love and with zest for life and excitement about this thing and passionate about this thing. And so there can be like that can also mean that you could have along with it a fear that will end or will be taken away from you. But it could mean that you also prop it up or invest into it, and ultimately it doesn't have like, you don't have all the answers, you don't have the full scenario, the full concept of what's really happening. That doesn't mean that it's whatever we invest into at this time is doomed to fail. And this is also not, Venus is not the ruler of this eclipse. So I feel like it's kind of a tangential part of this storyline. I don't feel like it's the main message for you guys. But it's going to be part of the whole story or part of the backdrop in some kind of way. So I think it's really important for you guys to check in with yourself. Like, is there anything I'm rushing into? Is there anything I'm overly hopeful about, overly optimistic about, that I can kind of slow myself down and see that I might be projecting onto it something that I really want, or something that I'm missing within myself? Like, what am I running from? If I'm running towards something, what am I running from as well? Like, what is in my heart that, like, it's not just what you desire. There's probably something else there that's a little bit, again, the fantasy, the ideal. And we can often escape through Neptune. And so when it's next to a planet like Venus, we can use relationships as an escape. We can use food as an escape. We can use, shopping or our style as an escape, sex as an escape, like anything that is Venus related. We can use that as a way of not having to face our reality, or not having to face something within ourselves or from our past. And we can, again, idealize it and jump headfirst into it and be like, oh, it's fine. But in reality, it's going to catch up with us at some point, and it's likely to reveal its full self. And for some of you, that could look like feeling disillusioned, feeling let down, feeling deceived, and then dropping that thing. And then maybe other people, just looks like, oh, I didn't really have the full scenario, the full situation. This kind of changes things a little bit, and then I have to change my approach, or change my perception or my viewpoint of this thing. So I think that's something that really needs to be kept in mind. Like, this is a transit that I would absolutely take note of, if I had this in my own chart, or like this one happening now. Of course, we also have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happening as well. It's not exact yet until April 20th. I have a whole separate video on that, so I'm not going to do another one for it right now, but I will link that down below if I can remember. But if not, you can always look for it on my channel. And that one I have for each of the signs, and it's really significant, so I definitely check that out. So I think that's probably all I want to say. No, that's not all I want to say. Okay, with this Venus-Neptune energy, and with this being really strong Aries energy, we can have a very strong desire nature. We want it, and we want it now, and we don't always see the full equation around what could happen with everything that we desire. Particularly with Venus being next to Neptune and Pisces. Venus and Aries, which Aries is already a sexual sign, and so is Pisces in its way. They both have, like, they're just different, but they both have, like, a strong connection with sexuality. So having these together, there can be some strong, like, lust here, and we, again, might not fully see that this is, like, our person, but we think that it is. Or we could be attracted to a situation that is deceptive. So it's like getting into something with somebody else who is in a relationship, especially because this Venus-Neptune is opposite Black Moon Lilith in Libra. There can be stuff that's stirred up or revealed around this eclipse that shows some kind of betrayal or deception. So if that has been happening in anybody's relationships, this could be a time of, like, airing the dirty laundry, where secrets are revealed around, somebody cheating, or some people, like, at work sleeping together that weren't supposed to, like, this kind of seductress type of energy, or this insatiable appetite, or an appetite for things that are, like, taboo or off limits societally, or that are going to rub people the wrong way, or that involve triangulated relationships like adultery or betrayals. Like, a lot of those things can come up to the surface with an energy like this, especially because Pluto is making a pretty tight trine to that Black Moon Lilith, and Pluto is a truth revealer. It digs things up from the surface. So if there is, like, and it just does not have to be around sexuality. I think that's probably the most potent imagery of it, just because of the nature of Venus and Black Moon Lilith. But this can be anything in relationships. But you might start to see, like, something going on in a friendship dynamic, or in a connection with somebody, and you're like, I don't trust that, or that feels off for me, or I feel like there's something happening behind my back, or I feel like somebody wants something that I also want, and we're, like, in competition. There's something like this where it's like people can kind of be pitted against each other, or there can be a revelation or truth around people wanting things that they shouldn't want, or people in cahoots that shouldn't be in cahoots, stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that, especially if this is aspecting your birth chart. So if you have anything around those first few degrees of, like the first 5 degrees of Aries or the last 3 degrees of Pisces, you're really going to experience this a lot stronger, and it's going to be like in your life compared to, you know, someone else who doesn't have this aspect in their planet. So yeah, and I pulled the siren card around that. So it very much feels like that. It's like this, the siren singing the song, you know, trying to seduce you, telling you to come here, come here. And then you get pulled in and you get drowned. Or, so there's something around that where it's like something off limits, something that's dangerous, something that's dark or seductive that we could be involved in, or we could be hurt by, essentially. I guess the last thing I want to mention here with this being an Aries eclipse is the sense of remembering who we are and feeling like we're coming more into meaning and purpose in our lives. And I think that's because we are connecting more to our desire nature and our inner child and going through healing around that. So as we connect more to our desire nature, I feel like when we start pursuing it and we start to have more and more meaning and satisfaction out of life. And it's almost like life begins to just make sense. It begins to click into place. It feels more alive, more vibrant, which is already very classic for a fire sign. And again, it's like we remember more of who we are, who we always were. And we kind of unlock even just a wider like lens of ourselves, a bigger understanding of ourselves, which is really beautiful. So that I think is all I want to say. No, one more thing. One last thing, I swear. Okay, this eclipse is at 19 degrees, and Sabian symbols, 19 degrees means the magic carpet. There's like symbols associated with each sign, and the magic carpet is a symbol for this 19 degrees. And I just love that because there's that word again, that sense of magic that children have, this kind of different perspective, believing anything is possible, also getting height. So we're not just looking at the thing from up close, but we have this very Mars and Pisces energy where we're zoomed out, having this spiritual perspective, looking down on everything, and able to see things through the eyes of curiosity and possibility and a bigger perspective. And I think that that can be very creative. It can be a visionary energy. It can be very healing for us. And again, connecting to our inner child. So that is what I see for the Aries solar eclipse. And I'm going to go into what this looks like for all of the signs. I may post this video now first, and then I will probably post all the signs the next day or like a day after that. So be on the lookout for it. I will make sure to also put them in the description box down below for each of the rising and sun signs. So make sure you check those out when they are available. If they're not there, wait a couple days and then they will be. And if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like, which is a thumbs up, subscribe, comment down below, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.